I am going to call the Springfield City Council work session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Here.
Counselor Weber. Here. Counselor Mo.
Here.
Counselor Rodley. Here. Counselor Blackwell. Here. Counselor Doyle.
Here.
And Counselor Stout.
Here, thank you.
Before we start for the evening, I just want to take a second to acknowledge that Mayor Morsett's and former legislator Morsett's funeral was today. Several of us went out there, and Mayor Morsett contributed significantly through a lifetime of service to the city of Springfield, and we honor that, and he will be missed dearly. The first item that we have is the Affordable Housing Department of Administrative Service Grant Funding Award with Nancy Newton.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you for this evening. We're going to have kind of a conceptual conversation tonight in work session to talk about a contract that you will be approving at a later date. So no decision is required tonight, but I want to walk through the process. This involves a federal grant that was formerly the source, it was ARPA funds that went through the state of Oregon that were then allocated to Springfield for the purposes of affordable housing. So the total amount of this one-time federal grant was $620,000. Tonight, we're talking about $500,000 of it that would be converted into two projects for affordable housing. The first location would be 190 South 41st Street. The second location would be 1577 Laura Street. Both of these projects would be constructed by Deb Northwest. We have used this nonprofit in the past, and they have a history, documented history of providing affordable housing in our area. The remaining $100,000 would be then also used for the same purpose of affordable housing. There is a potential project in the works that is not yet in the ready to turn to a project stage. So we have these two in the pipeline that can go now. The key points to remember on this really is that funds need to be expended by December 31st, 2026, which is why we're coming before you tonight for a head nod on, yes, this is okay use for us with this developer. You saw in your packet information some of the requirements for the development of 13 units that would, and we are looking into the area median income percentage that they will need to meet for affordability index. We'll have that for you prior to you making that decision. And then also, you'll see, note on the scope of work, there was some wording that got cut off of item E. And so we will get that cleaned up and bring it back before you. So it was scheduled for consent on the May 5th agenda. We'll probably have to set aside maybe 5 minutes to just bring it back to you so you can fully discuss if you have any other questions.
Are there any other questions? The only question I had is we had another piece of property that was out like 52nd-ish that was I guess the same size as the Laura piece of property. Is that wrapped up in a different funding source, or is that something that is potentially included in this?
Mayor, I would need to check on that,
Okay.
but I am aware of the property that you're referencing.
Councilor Weber.
I just have a couple of questions regarding disbursement of funds.
Yes.
I assume those are dispersed with that quarterly report or at some sort of a disbursement period.
So this is done through this is actually state funding that they're passing through us, and it does have quarterly reporting requirements attached to it.
Right,
Yes.
okay. And if for some reason the funds aren't expended by 12/31/26 circumstances that were not, that are out of people's control, is there the funds that have already been dispersed, is there any issue with those being compliant with the terms of that grant?
There shouldn't be, council member, but I will double check on that. I mean, one of the things that talks about on the scope of work is having occupancy permit ready. So it really depends on what that circumstance would be. Say, for instance, they were able to get half of the units constructed and occupancy done, then those would certainly qualify. But so it really kind of, that's one of those classic it depends answers. I feel confident in this developer that we'd be able to get this project going. These are the projects that they have in the pipeline currently.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anybody else? No, I think we are good.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is the Santa Pac annual rate adjustment with Jeff Pascal. I don't know if Santa Pac's coming up too.
Yeah, I'm gonna introduce it and then I'll
Okay.
turn it over to Santa Pac to
Perfect.
answer the hard questions. Since trash is not my forte or refuse and disposal. So yeah, tonight is our annual review of the Santa Pac rates. It's part of the franchise agreement that we have with them that they bring the rates and the council approves any rate increase. So what you have laid out there and staff has reviewed that is they're proposing 2.6% rate increase, which is in line with what the inflationary factors were last year. One thing to note, they're proposing that, but I think if you read through the materials, you see that they're experiencing their labor rates went up, but they're holding to what the CPI is in the rate request. And then when we bring this back, part of the process, so any decisions or recommendations that the council has tonight on the rate, we'll bring that back packaged up with the full master fees and charges list on June 2nd for a public hearing and adoption. And right now I'll just introduce Aaron and Chris and they'll come up and they can, they'll walk you through some information they have and they can answer any questions you may have, unless there are any questions from me.
Any questions for Jeff? All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Hello, Mayor and City Council and City Staff and Manager. I'm Aaron Donnelly from Santa Pac. Thanks for having us tonight. I'm joined by, go ahead, Chris.
Chris Walker. I'm the interim district manager for Santa Pac.
So we do have a little presentation here because there are some significant changes that are coming to recycling in the state of Oregon this year in July. So we wanted to provide an update on that. But I guess before I moved on to that, did anybody have any questions about the rate increase requests of the CPI?
Are there any questions for Santa Fe? Councilor Stout.
I first of all, I love Santa Pac and I love the work you guys do. And I know we've had a great relationship with Santa Pac and the city of Springfield. So you have my respect and admiration. I just want to, I think, make a comment out there, which is that while the rate request initially seems very reasonable, every utility is bumping every single price cost. And I'm almost wondering if we can also look, just consider from the other side of things that not everybody's experiencing the same increase in CPI in their own household budgets. And so I just want to be really attentive to that in this conversation and any other pointed questions that I might ask. That's really all. Thank you.
That's good input. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely good input. If someone is having difficulty paying their bill or if the rate increase is too much, we do like to try and talk to them as much as possible to see what other services we can provide. If it's a different service level, we go all the way down, I believe, to 20 gallons once a month. And we try to encourage people to recycle as much as possible to divert because recycling is free with the garbage. But thank you for that. And look forward to anybody else have any questions on that? Okay.
I'm sure when you get through the presentation, we'll get have plenty of questions.
Okay. So the presentation tonight is about changes to really not just Springfield recycling, but recycling in the state of Oregon. So Oregon passed a legislation called the Recycling Modernization Act, and it is really a landmark legislation in the United States. Many states are following suit. Oregon is one of the first states to adopt it and actually enact it. It will become official in July of this year, July 1. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through just some, hopefully this will, am I doing that right? Is it the next button? Okay, I might have clicked a bunch of times there. Oh, sure. Oh, gotcha. Okay, yeah, if you just want to go to the next slide. Okay, so the next slide is, why is recycling changing? before we get to that, so just some background on this is that the recycling markets, as you might remember in the United States, or especially in the West Coast, faced a crisis in 2017, 2018, when China announced that they would no longer accept America's recycling. It created a lot of instability and dramatically raised costs to dispose of recycling. As a result, lots of stakeholders and the DEQ in Oregon, legislators started considering, how can we prevent this from happening again, and how can we create stability in the recycling markets and the recycling process. And so out of that it was years of work sessions that, we were involved with, a number of people obviously were involved to develop what became the Recycling Modernization Act. So why recycling is changing. So we the state wants to make recycling easier, cut contamination, and guarantee responsible end markets. So the goal of this is to require that the companies that produce this material in the first place then are responsible for paying for the recycling and the in-life sort of handling of that material. So if these companies are, large plastic producers, everything you get your packaging in from Amazon and so forth. So what they have to do is they're going to be required to pay into a fund. And that fund and the group itself of those plastic producers or packaging producers is called a PRO, a Producer Responsibility Organization. And so all of those companies come together, and then they're going to be under the umbrella of another company called CAA, Circular Action Alliance. And Circular Action Alliance is the group that's managing the RMA, all of the funding that has to be done and the work that has to be done on behalf of these producers. So the DEQ, so the Oregon DEQ is responsible for sort of the oversight and the governance of this program. And then they're going to require these companies to then pay into the fund that will then reimburse haulers and cities for certain activities regarding recycling. So it's sort of, I might have a graphic on it, but we'll see. One of the other long-term goals was to make sure that Oregon's recycling was ending up in a responsible end market. So when we collect recycling, we take it to a recycling facility, and those facilities, in order to receive funding, will have to be accountable to where the end markets for all of those materials end up. So there's a lot of news. Sometimes you hear of recycling ending up in the rivers, the ocean, and so forth. Those facilities will be accountable to track where all the material goes and prove that it actually is being recycled. So it's sort of an accountability factor as well. Let's see. They're also going to help pay for some education and outreach as well as some depots that will be coming down the line. So let's go to the next slide. So this is what we accept now in our commingled recycling program. Cardboard, pop cans, food cans, plastic jug, tupper bottle, paper box, dairy cartons, and then paper. We can go to the next one. And then the next slide is what's new. So another goal of the Recycling Modernization Act was that every city in Oregon has its own sort of program and its own list of what can go into the recycle can. And in order to clear all of that up, what they're trying to do is establish one list throughout the state that every city abides by, that everyone knows no matter what city you're in, essentially you can put the same materials into your recycle can. And it's called the statewide acceptance list. So for us, we actually already accept a large number of items that were on that list, but here's some new stuff: nursery plant, packaging, scrap metals less than 10 pounds in weight, aseptic cartons, and plastic buckets and pails and storage containers. So those are all new, and we hopefully those will help divert some waste out of the garbage stream as well. Yes, Victoria Doyle.
So this sounds really great,
Sure. Yeah.
but my thought process is they're not going to eat that cost. They're going to pass that on to us, right? So we're ultimately going to pay to have this new process done, where they ought to just charge us directly, and then we wouldn't be paying for 16 different acronym departments to run through the bureaucracy to get this done. That's just what it sounds like. That's not your problem, but I just don't see how they're not gonna, the people that we buy this stuff from aren't gonna just pass that on to us. So
yeah, that's been discussed a lot at the DEQ level as to what impact it'll have to consumers. I haven't heard that there's been definitive information on that, but in my personal experience, the companies tend to pass on their costs that they incur. But I mean, I don't have an answer for that, but that's it. Thank you for that comment. Okay, let's go to the next slide. What not to include. So this is contamination, obviously, that is very problematic for recycling centers. It can tend to shut down the facilities themselves if they have to climb in there and cut out bags from these large wheels that sort of move the material around. Batteries obviously are a huge concern. It's a big issue in the industry right now, causing lots of fires. Food or liquid can contaminate the recycling itself. And then bagged recycles is problematic because you want them to be loose and sort of jumbling around for the sorting equipment. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so beyond just the statewide acceptance list, there's also going to be depots that the producers are responsible for funding and establishing. So these depots are based on the number of depots you have to have in your city is based on the population of the city. So then they can be sporadically sort of spread throughout the city. There's also an opportunity for them to potentially be accepted at back to retail, return to retail stations, similar to how you might do light bulbs or plastic bags at grocery stores or something like that. So these are depots. These are items that will be accepted at depots. We'll continue to accept glass bottles and jars at the curb like we do now. But there'll be some other items that people can take to depots for that. Let's go to the next slide. This is other support that's going to be coming from the PRO group. So they'll be essentially subsidizing the costs to transport recycling after we collect it. So we'll collect the recycling and then we take it to a processing facility. If that processing facility is more than 50 miles away, then they provide a subsidization on the transportation cost of moving that material to the recycling facility. And so the recycling facility itself has to become certified. It has to be a certified recycling facility, and it has to be, there can't be one within 50 miles in order for you to get this credit. They're going to be funding. So what's available for education and outreach is $3 per capita is what's been announced so far. So population of Springfield times $3 is potentially what's available. As far as the materials and education, they are developing that at a statewide level, so it's consistent across the board. I'll show you just a logo of things you might start seeing soon. It's called Recycle On. But as far as how to get the materials out there, we haven't been instructed on that yet. Potentially future depots for collection of hard to recycle items. There's supposed to be glass companies are going to help subsidize the glass collection costs. Potential support for additional equipment if needed. We turned in a request, early on, they asked, what kind of funding would you need? And it's still sort of unclear as to what the impacts of this are going to be. But potentially we might need another truck if there's a lot more volume, or carts for more material or something like that. So there's potential support for that. And then I mentioned before, accountability for processors to ensure recycling is properly handled. So one of the questions that we sometimes hear is if we're getting funding, then what's that going to do to the rates? And at this point, we don't know exactly because this is such a new program, but we are expecting some kind of downward pressure on rates. But we just don't know clearly what that's going to be yet. So next time when we come back, we should have a better estimate as to what those impacts actually are and the benefits are. So next question, or next slide, sorry. So who's paying for this? This is sort of my earlier rambling as to all the acronyms, but these are some of the companies. They join, they're in this group called the PRO, and then underneath there is the Circular Action Alliance sort of group that manages those companies as part of the deal. So let's go to the next slide. This is kind of how everything works. There's the producers, which are the PRO groups, obviously the customers, there's the recyclers and the end markets. So everybody sort of has a role to play in the system. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so that's some of the outreach that we'll likely be seeing. Recycle On Oregon is sort of the branding that the DEQ has settled on and how to promote this new program. So you'll start seeing potentially commercials, flyers, information like that from Recycle On Oregon. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so Catherine Ashcroft, that is not me, that is Catherine Ashcroft. She's our sustainability coordinator. She's sitting here as well from Sanapak. And so she goes out and provides education to groups and schools and so forth. She'll be here, I believe it's next month. There's a Public Works Day, and we'll be out here in the parking lot as well. So she can assist businesses and residents on this as well. So yeah, that's the end of the presentation. Happy to answer any more questions you guys have.
Councilor Rudley.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here.
Yes.
I have a question, but first a statement. I'm very excited about nursery pots. I'm just going to say, because yes, that's all I have to say is I'm very excited about those. I don't know what Bring is going to do without everybody dropping off all their nursery pots, but I'm so excited about that. You mentioned a couple of times that there's going to be this accountability tracking, and I'm curious as to whether or not there's been any that's been set up yet, or what that's going to look like in terms of like the accountability of making sure people are paying and doing and all the things. Thank you.
So in order to receive funds ourselves, we'll have to, record the tonnages that we collect, obviously the trips that we would make to transport the material. And all that has to be documented and returned in order to receive reimbursement. But I think you might be talking more about the recycling center accountability. I haven't been on that side of the discussion as much, but I know that there's an in-depth certification process that they have to go through, and there's lots of requirements that they have to go through, like they can't have a certain amount of residual waste out the back end of the facility, and they have to truly sort and receive a percentage of diversion from their sorting efforts at the facility, because otherwise, theoretically, you could have material coming in, not sort it very well, and dispose of it as garbage and potentially save money. But there's accountability on that and the percentages they have to achieve. I think there'll be audits on the material that's outgoing, and then they have to track. So these facilities, they take all of our commingle that we put in a can, and they sort it, and then they bale that material separately, and then they ship that to end markets. And so those end markets are the ones that will have to ultimately be accountable by the facilities in order to what's happening to that material. Domestically, I think one thing that happened with the China store is that we ended up sort of developing more domestic markets, cardboard and paper. Obviously, we have companies like International Paper here in Springfield that didn't take that. There's, Denton Plastics, which is in Portland, that can process plastics. Aluminum and metal is easily recycled. I'd be happy to get you more information on that. But I know that the DEQ, if you just Google Recycling Modernization Act, they have a pretty extensive website with videos, and there's even a link that says questions, or I believe it's like frequently asked questions for municipalities. So you might want to check that out as well. And there's a whole section in there about the processing facilities. They're called CPRFs, I believe. There's lots of acronyms in this whole thing, but yeah.
Any question? Councilor Stout.
Just to be clarified, where is this processing facility going to be? Is this the Glenwood location, or is it elsewhere?
No. So right now we take our recycling, and some of it depends on the market conditions. Basically, you want to sort of shop and get the best price that you can on it. International Paper in Springfield accepts a lot of recycling for the area, and they sort it there. We also take recycling to our facility in Glenwood, which is EcoSort. We bale it, and then we truck it north to where the large facilities are. So there's about 7 large facilities in Oregon. There's one that just came online that Waste Management built. There's one in Salem called Garden Services that we've taken material to. But our parent company, Waste Connections, in May of last year bought its own MRF called Pioneer Recycling. It was one of the larger ones in Portland and in Washington. And so that's an opportunity for us as well to take material there. And then there's obviously there's been discussion of the Lane County's Clean Lane facility, which if built, they have a proposed recycling facility as part of that as well.
Councilor Doyle.
So I just want to thank you for this. I know I sound grumpy about fees, but the truth is that I love the fact that we recycle the way we do in Oregon. I was in New York back in 2001 and was trying to help clean up and was crushing cans. And the people were like, what are you doing? They had no idea what I was talking about and what I was doing. And so I hope that knowing that this may be national, maybe going nationwide would be really awesome. It still breaks my heart every time I go to a state and I see people throwing cans away because I'm like, that's worth a dime. But so, I mean, that education part of it, I think, is just so important, getting us to where it's just second nature. And it's like, no, we catch ourselves going, no, you don't throw that away, you recycle and what have you. And so I'd be excited to see that we start kind of going back to having more options prior to 2017, being able to actually do that. So anyway, thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I think this is a good reminder for everybody. Can you maybe update us on what happened in 2017?
Sure. So historically, there's a trade deficit, which I'm sure everybody's heard that term more recently, but historically, China sent us all the goods and we sent them back. And so they had all these boats coming to America full of containers and goods, and they were going back empty. And then someone along the way had the idea to send them back our recycling so that they could use that raw material to make those goods and then send it back to us. Unfortunately, a lot of the United States West Coast recycling was contaminated with garbage. And so we were sending them a lot of essentially recycling, but it was a lot of garbage. They were taking it because they wanted the raw materials so desperately. But ultimately, it was having I believe, a significant environmental impact on their country and on their people. And they were saying, and there was also potentially some political elements. They said, we don't want United States garbage anymore. And so they they started something called the China Green Fence. They gave a warning, and they did something called the China National Sword. And they said that China will not accept any recycling that has more than, I think it was like a 1%. It was a really low percent that was unattainable for anybody, essentially, to send the material. So it effectively cut off China, who was the major importer of American recycling. And that caused all of the recycling centers that we take material to no longer have a place to take it. And so they had to find sources to take it. Those places that agreed were more expensive, and they demanded more cleaner recycling. And so the facilities we took the material to had to slow down their lines substantially. They had to put limits on what they could accept. They were shutting down. Basically, it was sort of day to day. For a long time, we were having to call, and fortunately, we never had to landfill any recycling. We had good relationships with our processors, and they were able to take all of our materials. But it kind of caused this big backlog in the whole system.
And I think this is really important because in 2017, we thought we put it in the big blue bin and it all magically got recycled, right?
Yeah.
And so for us as elected leaders and the public, it's a good reminder if we don't follow the instructions that Sanapak publishes, right, we're essentially creating more garbage out there.
Yes, I think that's a good point. Yep.
The other thing, I think the other two questions I had about changes in the recycling is you mentioned the education funding that we would get $3 per capita. How I was unclear during the presentation. How is that getting spent? Who's getting those dollars? And who's creating this sort of programming around that?
Yeah. So Sanapak is a designated, receiver of those funds. My understanding is that they'll be available in July, but we still need to receive guidance from DEQ on what materials we're supposed to distribute and, what reporting back. We have to obviously account for all of our expenses and return it back to them in order to be reimbursed. To me, we have someone that's been sort of spearheading this throughout Oregon. We actually have a big meeting tomorrow with our companies to discuss this as well, but there's a little bit of vagueness right now in my understanding as to how that's going to work exactly.
Okay. And I'm fine knowing more when the information is available.
Yeah.
The other, comment that I had about the recycling was there were two things that would look like they had to go to a depot, right? Which was essentially aluminum foil, right? And then, shredded paper.
Mm-hmm.
And from a convenience and a sort of data safety perspective, my assumption is that it would be easier at some point if we could just bin the shredded paper, right? Because one of the, conflicts people have had is as we've gotten better at dealing with the 2017 paper, right? We're either we've got so much that from a privacy perspective, we're being told to shred, but you created this situation where, hey, I want to recycle this because all my life I've been told, hey, recycling's good. But also from a privacy perspective, right, I need to get that stuff shredded so that I can get it, protect my, personal information. And knowing that, like, if we could get to a point where that shredded paper is just going into the bin, the blue bin, it's going to be easier for everybody.
Yeah, ideally that would happen. I don't understand it all, but I do understand that the issues with shredded paper, that it doesn't look like paper to the sorting, and there's some issues with the sort of length of the paper itself, the pulp for recycling that causes issues with shredded paper if it's with normal paper. My guess is the PRO groups that are responsible for these depots might look to potentially subcontract that work to a current shredding hauler that has some kind of secure way to collect all that material, but I'm not sure.
So, like most of this from a programming perspective, it sounds like your feedback is, hey, this is still all new.
Yeah.
We're going to learn more as we go,
Yeah.
right? And just be patient as the information comes out.
And one of the things the head of the DEQ has said repeatedly is like, yes, the date is July 1, but that doesn't mean on midnight of July 1, everything's like rolling. He's like, it's going to be a process to step into it. For example, right now they're really looking at financing and doing the outreach for cities in Oregon that don't have any recycling. So they give a schedule of cities that are listed A through F, F being the most sophisticated and not necessarily needing it. Springfield's an F because we have a comprehensive recycling program here. But there are cities that are an A that are getting a lot of focus right now. So they're starting with that first.
Yeah. And I have two more comments to make. One of them is about composting related to food scraps, right?
Yeah.
Which is something we do in my household. And I can see why the uptake, the last time we chatted, you mentioned that like not a lot of people do that.
Yeah, we would like more people to participate. And that's part of Catherine's new role is to encourage that as well. The best thing we can do is to really try and get food waste out of our garbage. But it does take a lot of labor. You have to be dedicated. You have to separate it. A lot of people have a little bin that they can put in their refrigerator or even on their counter. It takes cleaning that bin, it takes going out there and putting it in your cart. During the summer, you put a bunch of food in your cart and you can get issues. So cleaning the cart, putting baking soda in there as you dump in the food is good, but it does take work. So it does take work. I would say it's worth it. For your kids and family, it's a good thing to do, but it does take work.
Yeah, and I think that was the feedback I was going to mention. Having done it probably for the last 2 years, right? It is a lot of labor, and you're always sort of fighting a very messy yard waste can, and that could stink and attract flies and all sorts of stuff that you have to be aware of.
Yeah.
And knowing that you've got a coordinator now to help get tips to people,
Yes,
is helpful.
Yeah, there's also new technologies that are emerging. I have one called a food cycler where you can keep it in your counter and you put food waste into it and it essentially grinds it up into a soil amendment, not necessarily compost, but it is a way to sort of get away from all the cleaning a little bit. Anyway, there's other things that are happening with that.
Councilor Rodley.
Thank you. Yes, we too have been on a quest for the last few years to reduce our food waste. You mentioned about batteries, which I know we hear a lot about not putting batteries in there. And just for anybody who might be watching, where can we take our batteries? Because I got a plastic bag of batteries. I've heard I could take them to Bi-Mart, but I'm not sure if that's up and going. So where can people take their batteries?
So I might ask Catherine if she knows a little bit more about this than I do, but I believe that you're right. I think Bi-Mart is a participant, but with Lane County. Lane County received a grant, in my understanding, to sort of have battery take-back locations. And I'm pretty sure that Bi-Mart is one of those locations where you can take it. Lane County also has a household hazardous waste drop-off location. So I'd probably advise people to look up that on the website. But we are going to also likely very soon have a battery, probably coming back to you to talk about batteries, because there's a number of communities that are starting to launch programs for battery collection, and because it is becoming a serious problem. Everybody has batteries with laptops and everything else. So, yeah.
All All right. The one piece of direction we've got to give tonight is we have to head nod what we want from a rate perspective. And I'm just looking to make sure everybody's okay with the staff suggested 2.6%.
It's significantly lower than we've had the last 2 years. I mean, it's like considerably less. So I think it's great. Yeah. Great. Just, these are never great, but
Right.
it's
No, yeah.
better than last time and the year before.
And I appreciate your guys' work and really hearing us on, the importance of rates to our community. That was a piece of feedback we've given in the last couple of years. We are pretty rate sensitive, and I appreciate you guys continuing to sharpen the pencil about it.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you need anything else from us, Jeff? Are you good?
We'll bring it back June 2nd.
All right, thank you. All right, so last item is the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee BPAC report.
Good evening.
You are not Drew.
No, I'm not Drew. Unfortunately, Drew got held up, flight delayed in Billings, Montana. So good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Michael Liebler. I'm your City of Springfield Transportation Planning Engineer, staffing BPAC, here tonight with Keith Dickey, Chair of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, to provide the BPAC's end-of-year report and talk a little bit about this year's upcoming activities. So with that, I will pass it over to Keith to start the presentation.
Thank you. Great. Before we begin, I just wanted to thank Councilor Weber for being our liaison to the BPAC for the last couple of years and for your input, which has been very much appreciated over that time. And I look forward, I believe Councilor Stout's going to be our new liaison, and looking forward to working with you on the committee going forward. And I also want to shout out to Drew, who isn't here, as city staff member has been great, very supportive, and also Michael. Those guys do great work. So thanks to all of you. Having said that, we have our 2024 year-end report, and you can just click to the next slide there, I guess. We really focused last year. I think I've been on this committee for this is my third year, and I came on in 2022. And it was, I think, kind of looking back at it, it was right when we first started to do actual in-person meetings again. I think now looking back at that, I realized that it must have been really difficult during that COVID time period for a lot of these committees to really coalesce. And I feel like the last couple of years, we really, are doing more and more. We're kind of getting our footing again, maybe. And so that's exciting. Last year, we've really focused on doing a lot of education. We do a lot of events around the city where we, try to make sure folks are aware that there's a BPAC in Springfield and share information about what's going on. So that's good. We also have done, we do a lot of audits, safety audits. And traditionally in the past, we've done, I think you've seen them, what we call walk audits. But last year we actually started doing bicycling audits as well, which has been really interesting because it's a different perspective. It's like when you're walking and you're looking at something and riding a bicycle and looking at something, it's a different experience. So those things are happening and continue to happen. This year we just finished our first one in Glenwood area, which was interesting. I learned a lot. We also, worked a lot on trying to, give advice on updating the city's website, the Walk Bike Springfield website. If you haven't looked at that, recommend you look at it. There's a lot of really great information on there. It's a lot of what we do, I think, is trying to, we have some really great tools, that the city has. I don't think a lot of people are aware that they exist. And I think that's something we really need to we try to work on. And that's when we go out and do these community events, we talk about that when we meet with folks and try to make them aware of that. We do work, a lot with, we have great partners that we work with, Lamb Lane, LCOG, and they've been very supportive as well. So going forward, I think this last year, beginning in January, we actually had our first kind of what we call a retreat. And we have two subcommittees on this, on our in BPAC. And I think there's another slide. Can you move to the next slide? I'm not sure. There we go. So that was the year-end report. Yeah, community outreach, Walk by Springfield, path etiquette, campaigns. We also talked roadway striping. We do stripings every year, and we try to have input on that where we see things that might be improved. And going forward, we also is really exciting that Drew has been able to secure the grant for a new bike ped plan, master plan for the city, which we're looking forward to. So, and you can go and click through there. We did the walk bike. I'm sorry, I hadn't seen this slide presentation, so we're working our way through it. Walk and bike, the safety audit. Yeah, we did G Street and Main Street last year. And the bike audit, we did the Rosa Park bike path and Harlan Gateway area. Again, and those reports are included in the information that you've received, so you can look at those. And you can next. And the kind of things that we do on those audits, we look for obvious stuff, obstructions, missing sidewalks, ADA curb, vegetation that's in the way of obstructing the pathways, those type of things.
What happens when you identify it?
We work with staff, and staff goes back and talks to the correct folks. So.
Yeah, I guess it would depend on what the level of need is for the issue. If it's a minor thing, that's something we can just pass on to the operations division, cleaning something up, removing debris. That's one level. There's another level, probably costs a little bit more. We have the funds, we can tackle it. And then there's larger things that as you're going, obviously we don't have the funds for a bridge, but it's always nice to know for planning purposes. So a lot of it's documentation, some of it's low-hanging fruit that we can take care of now. Some of it's just for us and planning to then present as future plans.
So all that feedback historically has been gathered. It may turn into a customer request form, or it may inform plans we're making, or, a piece of infrastructure we're working on. Okay, Perfect. Thank you.
Things like another thing that we look at is wayfinding. We have that's an area where I think we can really make a lot of improvements. That's kind of, to me, that's really low hanging fruit. Doesn't cost a lot to put a sign up somewhere, I don't think. It's not like, building a bridge. It's just a sign. But, if we can, one of the challenges we have here in Springfield is just the way the city's laid out. It's really difficult to get from one place to the other. I mean, if you live out in Thurston, it's not the easiest thing to make a bicycle trip into downtown. There are ways to do it, but, and I think the least we can do, until we can figure out something better, is at least have the correct wayfinding signage so that folks know that, yeah, this can happen. I mean, I may not know exactly how to get someplace, but if there's a sign that tells me I can get there, that's a big thing, right? That encourages me. So those are the kind of things that we look at, trying to figure out things that can kind of move the needle, improve the system without, spending tons of money. And then the bike audit, which I talked about, which is a new thing that we're doing, and I think we're learning some stuff by doing that. So we will continue to do those, and then the community outreach. And then last year we did, like I said, the Path Etiquette campaign. By the way, May is Bike Month, beginning May 1st, all the way through May, and we have a bunch of events here in Springfield, which you're all welcome to attend. The Wheels by the Willamette is, we're going to do 2 of those in May. It's down by the kind of the intersection of River Hills and West D on the Willamette Lane bike path. And I'd encourage you, if you've never been to one of those before, ride your bike or just stop by and spend a little time. You get to visit with folks that are riding their bikes to work or back and forth, and you learn a lot. We did the Children's Festival, the block party, October, and then just recently we did the egg hunt out in Thurston, which was great, and I'm glad we did that. And I think we're trying to, and if anybody's got suggestions on other events that we should be at in the city, we're open to that, because, we want folks to know that we're out there. And the White Bike Springfield page, again, that was revised last year. I think it's a lot easier to use, a lot of good information on there. And we'll continue to, I think, work on that going forward. And for this year, we reconstituted our subcommittees. We had 2 subcommittees before that they kind of were out of whack. The portfolios for them really were kind of out of date. So in January, we got together and we kind of redivided that. We came up with 2 subcommittees, one that focuses on accessibility and connectivity, which is more kind of infrastructure stuff. And then the other one is education and outreach. And really what we want to do this year, we're really trying to reach out to other, partners in the community, like the Chamber of Commerce, folks like that, just to talk to them about, how, bicycling and good pedestrian access is important. And it is, we've got a great downtown, and probably anecdotally, I run into people that are friends of mine. I used to live in Eugene a long time, and all of a sudden I'm finding all these folks from Eugene that are showing up in downtown Springfield. And we need to make it easy for them to get here. If they're riding their bike from Eugene, we need to make sure we got good wayfinding that says, hey, this is where downtown Springfield is, those kind of things. So, those are things that we're supportive of, and this coming year, working together, and also with other folks like LCOG. LTD, you guys know, has been very supportive, especially with the bike share program. So, we've got bike share now in downtown Springfield. Let's make sure people can get here, although they have to cross Mill Street, which is a whole nother situation. But so anyway, that's what we're up to. A lot going on. And any questions?
Questions? Councilor Rodley.
Thank you so much. And prior to Councilor Weber, I got to come to the BPAC meeting, so it was before you were there.
Okay.
And one of the things you didn't mention that I remember was a conversation when I was on BPAC is like bike repair. Do you all still have like the bike repair kits or a way for folks to check stuff out, or am I making that up?
No, that might be through.
Sure. At the time you were on the BPAC as the liaison, we were working with some grant money to put in some bike fix-it stations. We had a little hiccup with that in trying to find a Buy America product to be able to actually purchase it. It was rather difficult. We moved on from that. I don't believe we were successful in being able to find that. I do know that Willamette Lane has had success in that and has put some bike fix-it stations, I know, at the Bob Keeper Center. I'm not sure if any other places. So I think we're going to continue to look into how they got that through the Buy America, and see if we can replicate that and see if we can still work with that grant funding.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else? Councilor Stone?
Just dream with me for a minute, and maybe this has come up in your conversations. If you had, let's say, unlimited buckets of paint and maybe a week of staff time, 2 or 3 people in Public Works, where would you paint stuff? Like, the chevrons that say there's bikes here, or, more indications, or little green, segments like we have, or would you say, bollards? Safety always comes back to me. I am the biggest proponent of bollards in lieu of let's say infringing on others' property rights. I'd rather install bollards to make things safe. I'm just curious, like let's say you had, a chunk of money, what would you do?
Well, that's an interesting question, because obviously we don't have any money, but it's, I would say, like, I would try to make what we have now, better in terms of just, better wayfinding, and if we have if a street is designated as a bicycle street, let's make sure that there's sharrows on that street. We don't have that now. There's a lot of streets that just aren't marked that way. So I think just starting kind of from the basics, there's things we could do to make our bicycle system better that I don't think cost a lot. It's just having the bandwidth to get it done, and I know the staff is it's got a lot going on. And I think I'm hoping that I'm excited about the bike ped plan that Drew's going to be working on, because I think that's an opportunity to visit all that stuff and to really go back and make that right, and I think my understanding is the existing bike ped plan is fairly old, probably not, it needs to be revised. So once and I think that'll be happening. I understand that the work on that's going to be starting next year, I think. And so there's going to be opportunities there to really, I think, make some really good positive changes, again, without having to like tear up streets or anything like that. It's just, making what we have better, Yeah.
Councilor Weber.
I just want to share my appreciation for the members of this committee and for Drew and Michael. Drew and Michael come in often on Saturdays to help with these bike and walk audits. Their dedication to helping make that path of travel safer and just really thinking about what's possible, but also understanding financial constraints is a balancing act that you're constantly dealing with. And I just, this committee right now, they came in on a Saturday for 4 hours, was it?
Yeah, 3 or 4 hours.
Had some really great discussion about planning, changing the committee structures, just doing all the work to really make, just make things make sense, right? The work they're doing really has some structure around it now. And I just want us to share my appreciation.
Great presentation. The one question that I did have is we did get a communication packet memo that was talking about sort of trips and data associated to multimodal transportation. Is that something that's going to the BPAC?
One of our BPAC work plan agenda topics is better data collection.
Yeah.
It definitely a desire from the committee to be able to prove the worth of the different things that they do, but also the larger projects that we do. I believe Councilor Pictionary wanted some before and after data about the Daisy Virginia Bikeway. Previous councilor. And so we're starting to look at being more proactive with collecting data. We've engaged LCOG with getting some before and after data for the 42nd and Daisy Virginia intersection improvements. And we're going to continue to do that and work with the BPAC to identify areas that we need to collect more data for. Bike and ped data is, especially safety data, has always been hit and miss in the transportation world. We often have to talk to hospitals as opposed to get it from accident data. And as we increase the monetary limits for the thresholds for reporting a collision, we also get more limited data. So more data and being more proactive in getting before data for larger bike and ped projects is one of the focuses for the BPAC for this year.
I would say that it's not just bike and ped that struggles with the data question of transportation, that has been pretty consistent throughout, every state transportation project. And I hope, and I think I continue to share the observation that the ODOT, helping to wrap their hand around some of these data questions would do a lot to support citizen groups as well as local staff. I'm gonna, I have a question specific to this memo, so I'm gonna try to throw a curveball, and if you want to come back to me and answer it, that is perfectly fine, because I'm sure you do not have the memo in front of you. It lists the North Bank Trail at D Street is having roughly 600 daily trips. So if I if I think about 600 daily trips, what would that be from like a road perspective? Like from a car perspective, like what kind of road would be 600 daily trips?
I would say that for vehicles,
For vehicles, yes.
a roadway that has 600 daily trips would be more in the local kind of categorization. Usually a local would be about 0 to about 1,000 trips is what we try to keep. Once we see that, then we're into more of a collector. You see more safety and other issues associated with that. I think for bicycling in our area, 600 would be essentially considered like an arterial for us.
Okay.
Probably one of the higher volumes from one of the counters that we have. And I think that's mostly from everybody coming in through Eugene. So that's pretty accurate, pretty good data. Definitely high for us. I'm probably going to have to get back to you as to whether, what 600 matches for a functional classification of a bicycling facility, but I can say relative to, our city, that's a fairly high number.
And I don't think there's a need to do any research here, right? Just having your anecdotal kind of observation around like, well, the busiest bikeway we clearly have, right? Like, to give some context around it is helpful enough.
I just
Sure.
would chime in there. I live on that bike path right in that area, and I'm down there every day, and we've lived there since 2016. And the one thing you have to I think I'm sure you're aware of this, maybe you're not, but I think there's just anecdotally the development of the e-bike has changed how people get to work. And basically that Westie bike path system, to me, it's basically the Franklin Boulevard of bicycles between Eugene and Springfield. I mean, that's pretty much how most people, and I see it in the morning when I go for a walk. It's like a commuter arterial. Even during the winter time in the fall. I mean, it's increased over the year to year. I'm sure it has. And I think it's going to continue to do that because I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to get on an e-bike and ride one, but it's fun. And it's also, you don't have to work out very hard. I mean, you can easily ride an e-bike and not break a sweat to get from Eugene to Springfield. So I think, my personal feeling is, we need to be looking at our bike infrastructure more like we look at our car infrastructure. Because more and more we're going to see, that happening. And there's all sorts of issues with that. Safety issues. I mean, you guys, there's people are riding e-bikes on those trails that are doing 25, 30 miles an hour, with young families and strollers and old people that are in walkers. And there's all sorts of issues there. And that I think in the coming years, we're going to have to deal with that because these systems were not built for that. They were built mostly for recreation. And what we're finding, I think what the reality of it is that they're now being used for, transportation. So, I think that's just something that we have to kind of wrap our heads around as a city and as leaders as well.
Yeah, those are really great observations. And, and I think, as between e-bikes and scooters, and there's a bunch of stuff that is going on here, over the next couple of years here, and you get your opinion about how to keep, where we should engage as a council and how to keep people safe, right? What you've told me is pretty consistent with the public feedback we've heard around that area for the last, I don't know, maybe 3 years. So it's definitely something that's on our mind. And as we wrap up, I just want to just observe, everything I tell all citizen groups roughly the same thing. The more and crisper data that we get that shows a growth in usage of transportation and systems and and the changes that are happening in households makes it easier to sort of invest in things, right? Like, because when we have people using the system, right, then suddenly it becomes an easier community conversation about where we need to make investments. I really appreciate the time and effort. This was really well put together, and I enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to adjourn the work session and we will reconvene for CETA in a little bit. Scheduled at 7 o'clock. We're going to say it's 7:02.